Alignment is so important because it determines how much resistance swimmers create as they move through the water. The more resistance they create, the slower they're going to swim. There are two main issues that freestyle swimmers need to look out for. So the first thing is they want to be moving as horizontally through the water as possible. So they want to stay in horizontal alignment. Rarely will they be moving with the head down and the hips up too much, although that can happen. Generally speaking, when there's problems with lateral alignment, the head is up, the hips are down, they're kind of plowing through the water. And so that's going to create a ton of resistance, and swimmers are going to swim a lot slower as a result. So swimmers want to create as much horizontal alignment as possible. The second issue is lateral alignment. So when they're moving forwards, if they're going side to side, that's going to create issues with lateral alignment. Sometimes you see that independent of the breath because swimmers are swinging the arms across the body. And sometimes it's caused directly by the breath because by picking the head to the side, that's going to pull the shoulders out of alignment, the hips out of alignment, and now they've got problems. So poor alignment is really going to slow swimmers down. So making sure that they have great body position in the water and they can maintain that position is really, really important. One of the other important aspects of the skill of alignment is maintaining alignment as swimmers switch from position to position. So when they're on one side, they're rotated to the left, they've got to switch to the other side, and they've got to do that without losing their position. And that's really important. That's a really difficult skill for a lot of swimmers because they tend to think of body position, body alignment as a static thing, but really it's a dynamic thing, and that's where a lot of the challenge comes through. So we talked about breathing last time and how breathing can affect alignment. So if you want to know more about the breathing aspect of it, please watch that video. We're just going to stick with non-breathing alignment here, and we're going to take a look at what it looks like and what it looks like and what it can look like when things go wrong. So we'll take a look at horizontal alignment in distance swimming here, and as you can see, there's a line from hand to toe. And so what swimmers really want to accomplish is being really, really level in the water, and that's super important for minimizing the drag. And what you can see here is when the head's down, good alignment, and then even when he breathes, hips stay in position, it's still really good alignment. You can't see too much of a difference, and that's a really important aspect of maintaining great alignment is doing it through the breath. So again, staying really stable, staying really long, staying really level. Key aspect of alignment in freestyle. Take a look at the same thing in sprinters here, and you can see the head's down, the hips are up, and they're maintaining that position, and there's not a whole lot of movement in terms of up and down, hip side to side, or the hips dropping as they go through. So really level, really great position, and it's all about just holding that position. So distance swimmers and sprinters, there isn't too much of a difference in terms of the posture that they create and the position they create and the alignment they have as they move through the water. Being level at the surface is what's really, really, really important. So with horizontal alignment, it's not so much about what you do, it's about what you don't do. And what swimmers really need to focus on, and what we need to help them work on, is finding a position where they can be level, the hips are up at the surface, and everything is moving straight through the water, and that they're able to maintain that position when they're going at really high effort levels. Now, when it comes to lateral alignment, what we want to see is that the shoulders aren't moving side to side, they're rotating, and everything is moving straight through the surface. So take a look at this swimmer here, and as you can see, shoulders are rotating, but they're not going side to side. And she does a great job here through this breath. You can see the head stays right on line. There's zero side to side motion. And as a result, if you watch the shoulders here, they're cranking back and forth. They're still cranking back and forth, but they don't slide out to the side when she takes that breath. So she's got great lateral alignment, and she does a really great job during the breath, which is something that a lot of swimmers struggle with. So again, just coming straight through, hips aren't moving side to side, shoulders aren't moving side to side, everything's moving forward. And she actually breathes to both sides, and you still see the same thing. So head's down and level, still head's right in the same position, and it comes right back, and it's really smooth like that. So again, pay attention to the hips this time. You can see from side to side, they're rotating, they're moving, but they're not moving side to side. So shoulders are in line, head's in line, breathing's in line, hips are in line. And so what you can see sometimes is either because of the breath or just in general, the shoulders start moving, the hips start moving, and then they're creating a whole lot more resistance as they go through the water, and that's going to be really problematic because that's going to create a lot more drag and it's going to slow them down a lot. So being really good about rotating instead of turning side to side in order to get the range of motion through the shoulders is really important to minimize the impact of drag. So to touch on the last piece, we'll talk about maintaining position as they go through the water. So what I want you to pay attention to here is the hips are staying right at the surface, the head and the shoulders staying right at the surface, and everything is happening smoothly and rhythmically. As he transitions from body position to body position, there's not a whole lot of extra movement or unnecessary movement. He maintains really great alignment. So everything is level in the water. He's still keeping everything moving forward, and it's a dynamic position because he's shifting from side to side, but it's still one that's stable and minimizing the creation of resistance, thereby minimizing drag and helping him go fast. So maintaining great alignment is not a static skill, it's a dynamic one, and swimmers have to be able to manage that and hold their position even though they're doing all these other things with their limbs that can affect what they're doing with their body. And if they're able to do that successfully, they're going to swim a lot faster. So we'll take one more look at this swimmer here. And again, you can see that everything is happening really fast. It's happening dynamically, but she's still doing an excellent job of maintaining her alignment. Her head staying down. She's going side to side in terms of the rotation, but she's not going side to side in terms of a lateral deviation. She's keeping everything super clean and everything super fluid. And that's exactly what we're looking for. And this is during a sprint race. She's doing all these things at really high stroke rates. And again, maintaining alignment from a continuous perspective in terms of shifting from position to position is a really important skill, and it's one that's ultimately going to allow for swimmers to swim even faster. What are the two key skills for minimizing resistance and optimizing alignment in backstroke? Today we're going to discuss the two key skills that swimmers need to master in order to minimize drag to optimize their speed in backstroke. So swimmers need to maintain great horizontal alignment. They need to be horizontal in the water as they move through the water, and they need to maintain great lateral alignment in terms of not swaying side to side, again, as they move through the water. If swimmers can optimize and improve these two skills, they're going to swim faster, even if they don't improve the amount of propulsion they create. Alignment is so important because it's like removing the brakes. And so the better swimmers can maintain their alignment as they move through the water, the less resistance they'll create, the less speed they'll lose, and ultimately the faster they'll swim. Let's check out what these key skills look like. The first key skill is maintaining horizontal alignment. So swimmers want to be level in the water and move through the water as smoothly as possible. So one of the mistakes that you'll see is swimmers swim with a really high head position, which is going to drive the hips really low. So with this athlete, you can see his cap. You can even see that the writing on the cap, he's keeping his head down and in line. If that head was up and out of the surface of the water, that's going to create a problem with alignment. It's going to drive the hips down, which is going to create a lot more resistance as that swimmer moves through the water. The other issue you can sometimes see is swimmers do the opposite and they really press their head down and they press the back of their shoulders down into the water really far, and that creates a huge arch in the back as they move through the water. That too is going to create a lot of resistance, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult for swimmers to create speed. So the principle is simple. Swimmers want to stay as level as possible, and they want to keep their spine as straight as possible as they move through the water. They don't want to arch their back by lifting the chest up to the ceiling, and they don't want to lift the head, which is going to push the hips down towards the bottom of the pool. Both of those actions are going to create a lot more resistance and create a lot more drag. So again, keep it simple, and swimmers just want to maintain a position that's moving through the water as horizontal as possible and as smoothly as possible, almost like the shape of a hull in a boat. It's going to have a small rounded position, and they want to just slide right through in order to create as little resistance as possible to create as much speed as possible. The second major alignment issue that backstrokers may often struggle with is that of lateral alignment. And so when viewed from over top or from underneath, you'll see swimmers moving side to side, starting with the head. Then that will cause the shoulders to move side to side, which is going to cause the hips to move side to side. And all of a sudden, they're wiggling their way down the pool. And that's going to create a ton of resistance. It's going to create a ton of drag, and it's going to really slow them down. And where this usually comes from, sometimes it's just that the swimmers really struggle to keep their head still. But a lot of times it comes from the arm recoveries. And so what we'll watch here is two swimmers who do have excellent arm recoveries. And you can see how the hands enter about shoulder width or maybe even a little bit wider. And that's going to minimize the amount of lateral alignment issues that they have. Now just imagine that these arms are coming over the top and they're entering way behind the head. So the momentum of the arm is going to move the head to the side. It's going to move the shoulders to the side, and that's going to lead to the hips moving from side to side and cause all sorts of problems. So really great lateral alignment often comes from having really clean and really direct arm recovery. So you can see in these swimmers, they're coming right over the top. The hand is entering about shoulder width or maybe a little bit wider. And again, that's going to minimize the amount of side-to-side motion. You can see these swimmers, both of them, their head's really stable, the shoulders are really stable, and they're not moving side to side. And a lot of that is being driven by really clean and really effective arm recoveries. So if swimmers are struggling to keep everything straightforward in alignment, usually the first thing to look for is to look for the arm recoveries. If they're out of line, if they're off, it's going to cause a lot of problems with lateral alignment, and that's going to create a ton of resistance. It's going to make the head move, it's going to make the shoulders move, it's going to make the hips move, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems. Not only does it cause resistance problems and create more drag, it's going to make it more difficult to create an effective pull because there's not going to be a stable platform to initiate that pull from, which again is just going to make the problem worse. Swimmers need to really make sure that they're keeping that head stable, and they need to make sure that they're recovering the arms effectively, or they're going to run into all sorts of problems. So we'll take a look at lateral alignment here again from under the surface so you can see a swimmer that's doing a really good job of it, and we'll talk about what could go wrong and what that might look like. And so if you see here, the hands are entering right on top of the shoulders. It's really direct. It's really straight. Again, hand is entering right above the shoulders. Now if you watch a swimmer's head, it's not moving around much. It's staying really stable. And if you watch the hips, they're rotating, but they're not moving side to side. They're really stable as well. And then same thing with the shoulders. So because there's no lateral torque coming in from the arms, causing the head or anything to move side to side, everything stays really stable. Everything stays really direct. And so this swimmer is not creating any unnecessary drag by moving the head side to side, by moving the shoulders side to side, moving the hips side to side, and disrupting lateral alignment. They're doing a really good job of entering directly and making sure that everything is moving forwards as opposed to side. And as a result, they're going to create a lot less resistance, which is going to create a lot more speed, and it's going to improve their endurance because they're using less energy to move forward, which is going to allow for more energy to be used to create speed. So backstroke alignment is ultimately simple. Swimmers need to stay level and they need to move directly through the surface. Once you identify what the real issue is, it becomes pretty simple to get swimmers in the right position. They just need to get their head in line horizontally. They need to avoid arching the back and pressing the shoulders back into the water. And they need to make sure that their arm recoveries are direct so that they're not causing any sort of lateral issues. As with most skills, creating change is going to be a lot easier and a lot more effective when you take a simple approach to what's happening when swimmers move through the water. More than any other stroke, breaststroke creates a lot of drag. And if swimmers want to go fast, they have to learn to minimize the amount of drag they create. Because the more horizontally aligned swimmers can be as they move through the water, the faster they're going to swim. And unfortunately, because of the arm recoveries, because of the breath, and because of the leg recoveries, it can be really difficult to maintain and establish great horizontal alignment through the water. One of the key skills that elite breaststrokers consistently demonstrate is the ability to maintain horizontal alignment as much as possible throughout the entire stroke. They do a really good job of making sure their hips stay up at the surface of the water throughout the stroke, and in every stroke, they always establish complete horizontal alignment regardless of how fast they're swimming and how fast they're moving their arms and legs. Let's check it out. Because it happens a little bit slower over 200-meter races, we're going to take a look at 200-meter swimmers first, and then we'll take a look at 100-meter swimmers. So if you see here, swimmers here, what they're going to do is they're going to achieve a position where they're completely horizontal in the water. You can see the end of the stroke here, the swimmer on the top is literally completely straight from toes to feet. And so that's going to minimize the amount of drag that he creates as he moves through the water. And then as you watch his hip position here, as he takes his pull, his hip position, even though his head and his shoulders are coming up out of the water, it's not dropping at all. And if anything, it's actually rising up. And so what can tend to happen is that when swimmers come up to breathe, they're going to drop their hips down, and that's going to destroy their horizontal alignment. Now we'll watch the swimmer on the left. And you can see here his hips are staying up at the surface as he breathes. And as he returns back down, he's going to establish a really aligned position where his head's down, arms are straight ahead, legs are straight back, and he's in really good alignment. And as he takes his pull here, hips stay up at the surface. And again, they may even rise up at the surface a little bit. So everything stays in a really good alignment. And then after each stroke, they get back to an excellent alignment so that they can minimize the amount of drag that they create. If swimmers don't come back into this horizontal streamlined posture here, what's going to happen is they tend to get higher and higher and higher, and that's going to make them go slower and slower and slower. They're going to get more and more tired, and that's a vicious cycle that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So relatively simple skills, not always particularly easy to do, but keeping the hips up at the surface throughout the breath, and then also making sure that each stroke has a point of complete horizontal alignment. So we'll take a look at another swimmer here, and you can see the hips right at the same place the entire time. They never drop, and she does a really good job of getting back into alignment at the end of each stroke. So maintaining as much horizontal alignment as possible throughout the stroke. There's going to be some disruption in order to pull, in order to kick, but that disruption is minimized by keeping the hips up at the surface and then making sure that horizontal alignment is completely reestablished after each stroke. So while better streamlining and better alignment tends to be thought of as associated with 200-meter swimming, as we'll see here, that's not necessarily the case, and 100-meter swimmers do the same thing even when they're swimming at world record speeds. So you can see here during the pull, the hips stay up, there's no drop in the hip, and then the swimmer is going to get back into a completely aligned position. He's horizontal in the water, his head is down, his hips are up, and then his legs are up and his arms are outstretched. So even though he's swimming at a really high rate and a really high speed, he's still able to keep the hips up when he pulls, and he's able to get back into an aligned position in between each stroke. So even at really high speeds, he's taking the time and the effort to make sure that he maintains as much horizontal alignment throughout the stroke as possible. One of the mistakes that many swimmers make when they try to swim fast breaststroke is they just go to really high tempo and they never get back into alignment every time. And what happens? More and more drag, more and more fatigue, which means more and more drag, which means slower and slower swimming. So swimmers have to make sure that they maintain their horizontal alignment, or they're going to pay the price, and they're going to pay the price really quickly and really severely. So we'll take a look at another swimmer here. And as you can see, as she pulls, the hips stay up at the surface, and she does a really good job of getting back into alignment throughout each stroke. And so she's horizontal in the water here. She's not swimming with the head up and the hips down. She's getting really great alignment, and she's doing that, again, at really high speeds, and she's making sure that she establishes great alignment with each stroke. And even though she's going to start her stroke pretty early, she's still in great alignment, at least for a split second, before she comes back out of it. And because of that, she's going to get back in line, she's going to minimize the drag, she's going to give herself a little bit of break, and she's going to prevent herself from getting worse and worse and worse as she goes through the swim and as she begins to get fatigued. So alignment in breaststroke is ultimately simple. Swimmers need to maintain a great horizontally aligned position as they take the pull and as they take the breath, and just as importantly, they need to make sure that they always achieve a horizontal position at least at some point in the stroke. Doing so is going to greatly reduce the amount of drag that they create, and it's going to allow them to create a lot more speed with a lot less effort. And now we're going to talk about the key skill of reestablishing horizontal alignment and how to actually do that while swimming with really high stroke rates. One of the mistakes you commonly see in breaststroke is when they try to pick up the stroke rate, they never get back to a fully aligned position. They stay somewhat elevated with their skills, and they just kind of progress through the race like that, and that's going to slow them down, and it's going to make them really tired. When swimmers try to swim fast, the instinct is to pick up the rate rather than maintaining their skills, and this is certainly the case in breaststroke. However, if things are done right, swimmers are able to reestablish great alignment after each stroke cycle, and they can do so without dropping the stroke rate. So in this video, we're going to go over the key skills to make that happen. When swimmers breathe, they have to recover the head and they have to recover the arms forward. So they can do that passively, or they can do so in a way that actually promotes their alignment. So what I want you to pay attention to here is you can see how when swimmers breathe, they breathe forward and they breathe aggressively forward, and they recover the arms aggressively forward. And what that's going to do, it's just like a teeter-totter. When one end goes aggressively forward and down, the other end's going to come up. And so if you watch the swimmer here in the yellow cap, you can see him be aggressive coming forward, and watch, hips pop right up there, and that's going to get him back into alignment. And so when swimmers recover, if they can do so with an aggressive lunge, an aggressive attack with the head, the shoulders, and the arms, they can use that to help influence their body position so that once they get fully extended in the front of the stroke, they're already ready, in position, in alignment, and they can move right into the next stroke. If swimmers do it passively, they're not going to have the alignment that they want, or they're going to have to wait in order to get the alignment that they want, And in both cases, that's going to slow them down significantly. So we can see the same thing here. You can see the swimmers are being aggressive with breathing. They're breathing forward. They're not breathing up. And they're recovering the arms aggressively, which is going to get everything in front of their body and help them get the hips up in line once they get full extension in the stroke. You can see it here. Watch how the swimmers are aggressively getting forward. You can see their hips pop up. You can see the wave pop up with each stroke. So what they're doing is they're using the weight of the head, the chest, and the arms to create a lever to pop the hips up. And the more aggressively they can recover the arms forward, that's going to facilitate their stroke rate, but it's also going to do so in a way that puts them in position to be in alignment right when they reach full extension, and they can move right into the next stroke without any hesitation. And so you can see here on both swimmers, there's a really aggressive lunge forward, and the hips are going to pop up as a result. And again, that's going to accomplish two goals, keeping the stroke rate up and getting a great alignment at the same time. So we'll watch it from under the surface here. You can see the head presses down, the chest presses down, and his hips are up at the surface when he's reached full extension of the stroke. And you'll notice too, there's no real hesitation in the front of the stroke. He doesn't have to wait for it to happen. As a result of pressing the chest and reaching forward, he gets right into a line. So there's that aggressive lunge, and the hips pop down because everything's sinking in the front of the stroke. And again, he can move right into the next cycle. So swimmers can actually use their stroke rate to help facilitate better alignment. And again, that allows them to get the best of both worlds, higher rate and better alignment. And so by aggressively recovering the arms, the chest, the head, and the shoulders, you can get a lot of weight in front of the body, and that's going to press the chest down, which is going to pop the hips up. We'll see it with another athlete here. Right there, you can see the hips pop up as she comes forward. Again, it's a subtle movement, but it makes a big difference right there in terms of how much drag is created and therefore how much speed is created. And again, there's no hesitation at all in this stroke, but right there, that little extra lunge, that little extra effort getting forward is going to pop the hips up, so she doesn't have to worry about it. She doesn't have to wait for the hips up right there. It all just happens as a natural result of an effective and aggressive arm recovery and breath recovery. So we'll take a look at one more swimmer here, and you can see driving forwards and his hips pop up. And with an aggressive recovery right there forwards, throws the head down, and then the hips pop up, and it allows him to be in excellent position to initiate the next pull. And so, again, recovering everything aggressively right there, and snapping the head down, snapping the chest down, snapping the hands forward. That's going to pop the hips up and allow him to get in great alignment with very little time, which enables him to get into the next stroke without compromising his streamline. And so what will happen a lot of times, swimmers will be a little bit lazy on that recovery, and they'll never get the hips back up, and they kind of start sliding through the surface, and again, creating a lot of drag, losing speed, and it's going to cost them a whole lot more energy in order to keep moving forward. So by being really aggressive with the arm recoveries, and not just the arms, but the head and the shoulders, it's going to get everything back in line, which is going to make everything flow more smoothly, and it's less that swimmers have to think about. They don't have to worry about getting back into alignment because just by recovering the arms, it all takes care of itself. So it's a simple skill, but it's one that can really have a powerful impact on how fast swimmers go, especially in the sprint events, because they don't have time to wait around to get back into alignment. They have to execute their skills in a way that ensures they get back into alignment with every stroke cycle, and they do so in a way that doesn't slow their stroke cycle down. If butterflyers can't manage their position and their alignment in the water, all the propulsion in the world isn't going to help them swim fast. Achieving horizontal alignment is critical for reducing the amount of resistance swimmers create, and thus it directly relates to how much speed they can create. So as much as possible, swimmers want to move through the water as straight as they can in butterfly. However, they can't necessarily do so because they have to recover both arms over the water at the same time. In order to do that, they're going to have to lift their chest, which is going to sink their hips. So the key to maintaining great horizontal alignment, so the key to reducing the amount of resistance swimmers create as they move through the water, is to find a way to minimize the loss of horizontal alignment when they lift the head and the chest to recover the arms and to breathe. And then after the arm recovery and then after the breath, getting everything back into line as effectively and as quickly as possible to reestablish great alignment. So swimmers have to minimize the disruption of alignment when they recover the arms and breathe. They need to get back in alignment after they recover the arms and breathe. And finally, they need to minimize the time that they're out of alignment. And the better they can do all three of those skills, the less resistance they'll create and the faster they'll swim. So let's dive in and check out what it looks like. So if we watch this swimmer here, we're going to start from the beginning of her stroke. And as you can see, she's relatively aligned and that the hips are up at the surface. The chest is pressed down a little bit and she's relatively level. So as she starts this stroke cycle, she's going to start to move out of alignment in order to prepare for recovery of the arms. So she's going to come up, lift the chest, lift the shoulders. She's going to breathe on this stroke. And this is going to create a position where her arms are free to recover over the surface. But in order to do that, her body's going to have to be at a little bit of an incline, and you can see that position here. And then as she recovers the arms, she's going to stay in that position, and then once the arms come back in, she's going to quickly get out of that position. So you can see she went from this inclined position to a pretty horizontal position pretty quickly. So that's the key skill of getting out of it, which is really important for swimmers to do after each and every stroke cycle. And so how she's going to do that, it's going to be three key things. One, the chest is going to be coming down out of the water, and that's going to create a little bit of a sinking moment so that the chest begins to drop down in the water. Secondly, you can watch the hands here. They're going to hit at about the same time. They're going to have momentum. They can drive the body down a little bit flatter as well. And then the third piece, if we watch the legs here, she's going to kick as everything enters, and you can watch the hips here pop right up to the surface at the end of the kick. So the kick pops down right there is when it finishes, up the hips go to the surface. So by entering relatively forward and aggressively, by letting the weight of the chest drop the chest into the water, and then by kicking aggressively, that can get everything back up into alignment, and it can get everything back into alignment really quickly. So we talked about a little bit earlier, it's not just the positions, it's about getting out of those positions really fast, which is important. So if we go back, you can see here, the alignment's not great, not because she's necessarily making technical errors, but because that's the reality of taking a breath and lifting the arms out of the water. That's the position swimmers are going to be in. And then she's going to get out of that, though, really, really quickly. And that's going to be really effective for minimizing the amount of resistance that she creates. So when it comes to lifting the chest and head out of the water, swimmers want to do as much as necessary, but as little as possible. So they need to get a clean breath. They need to get clean arm recoveries. And the more they can do that without lifting excessively, the least resistance they're going to be able to create without compromising the breath, without compromising the arm recovery. And so through this position, she's trying to maintain as much horizontal alignment as she can, even though she's going to necessarily have to disrupt it to get the arms over the water. So the better she can be, the better any athlete can be during this position and not lifting straight up, but lifting enough, that's going to be really important for minimizing the amount of resistance they create. And then regardless, they need to get out of that position as quickly as they can and as fast as they can and as significantly as they can. The better they can do with that, the least resistance they're going to create, and that ultimately means more speed. So the previous swimmer was swimming a 200-meter race. This swimmer is swimming a 50-meter race, and so there's going to be a little bit less total undulation. The stroke rate's going to be a little bit faster, but we're going to see the principles are the same. When she's set up in the front of the stroke, she's level in the water. And then she's going to lift up. It's not as high because she's not breathing, but she still has to lift up. And you can see the body's going to be at an inclined position right there especially. And then as she comes over the top, the hands enter, the chest presses, and the hips come up. And if we watch the kick, boom, the hips come up to the surface as a result of the kick. So when that entry happens, the chest press happens, and the kick happens all at the same time. Swimmers can go from this position right into that position and do so really quickly. And that's the key timing point that they need to consider, is getting everything to happen at the same time right there to pop back into alignment quickly and easily, not taking a lot of energy and not taking a lot of time. So they get into really great positions without wasting energy. So again, with the loss of alignment, she's going to be doing a really good job of staying low here. But even then, there's going to be an incline of the body. It's trying to minimize it as much as possible and then getting out of that position as quickly as possible by recovering the arms and then popping the hips up to the surface, tying everything together. So while it's not necessarily easy to do, horizontal alignment in butterfly is all about minimizing how much resistance is created when swimmers take the breath and when they recover their arms. And then after that, they need to minimize the impact of those movements by getting out of them and getting out of them fast. So if we watch here, swimmer's not in a great position because of the arm recoveries, but really quickly, they get back into position, and this is, again, at a 50-meter race, so the stroke rates are high. She's swimming really fast, but regardless of that, she's able to get back into a horizontally aligned position each and every stroke and that's going to be able to create a lot more speed. Whereas if she just started kind of going through the water like that, she's going to be creating more and more resistance, and that's really going to slow her down, and it's going to create a ton of fatigue as well. So again, horizontal alignment in butterfly, pretty simple. Minimize the rise of the chest, the shoulders, and the head so that swimmers are able to smoothly and easily recover the arms and get a good breath, but no more. And then after that, they need to get out of those positions fast, and they need to get out of those positions significantly enough so that they get back into alignment like we see this swimmer here. And that's true whether they're swimming 50s, 100s, or 200s. They've got to get back to that aligned position with each stroke cycle so that they can minimize the amount of resistance they create while maximizing the amount of speed they create. Hope that was helpful, and as always, keep it simple.